Okay, what I wanted to go over today is kind of the spline modeling. I have students are always doing box modeling, okay, and I hate box modeling. Box modeling is something we used to do 100,000 years ago, and unfortunately people are infected with that because there's so many tutorials on YouTube and such on box modeling. Everybody thinks, oh, box modeling, that's what I got to do is everything's going to box model. Box modeling sucks, okay, unless I'm building a box. So I'm going to go over how I would build. Basically, this is a bike pedal, okay? We're going to do a stylized bike pedal, kind of something that would be like on a Pixar, movie or something like that. So I'm not going to try to do a photorealistic bike pedal, but, something that looks more like a bike pedal than a box. Okay, so first I'm just checking. We should be set up with centimeters here. Max defaults to inches. You always want to be with centimeters, not inches, because every software known to man is centimeters besides Max. So, Maya is centimeters, Unreal Engine centimeters, ZBrush is centimeters, everybody's centimeters except for 3dsmax. So we want to, go 3dsmax. That way everything is the correct scale if we take it into another software. Okay. All right. So I'm starting off. I do spline modeling. Okay. A lot of people tell you don't ever do spline modeling. Okay. And basically they're correct. They should not do spline modeling, but I'm going to do spline modeling. So just starting with a basic rectangle here, and they'll make some settings here. You want to be able to try to start building this stuff to scale, okay? Because when we're doing welding and certain things, it's if your scale's off, it makes it more difficult. So we're going to build a pedal here or something, about maybe 6 inches by 4 inches, something like that. This pedal that I was given, that was starting with, that's over on the left here, was not quite to correct scale. I see that a lot of people have a problem with understanding to actually model in scale. They just model any size, but you really should be doing things to scale. I mean, we scale them again afterwards, but when I'm doing certain kind of things like welding on thresholds, if I've been building something and it's only an inch, tall, then my weld threshold is really off. So you should try to build to, a correct scale. So we're just going here. About 6 inches by 4 inches, and that'll be a good place to start. Okay, we just want to go ahead and convert it to an editable spline. I no longer need it as a rectangle, and not an editable poly, but editable spline. We want to keep it as a spline. Now, one of the funny things about Max, which I wish there was some way to fix, is its vertices when I'm building a rectangle are Beziers. I don't know why they're Beziers, because you'd think if I was building a rectangle, I want it to be a rectangle and they would be corners, but they default to Beziers. So I'm using splines, but I'm going to be using splines to build subdivision surfaces. So I want everything to be straight lines. I don't want these to be curved lines at any point. I want everything to be straight because I'm building for a platform of subdivision surfaces. So we're going to go in here, right click all these, and we're going to convert all these to corners. So we just click on it, go up left, up on the left side in corners, and we'll have to do that several times because Max has a tendency to want to make new vertices as Beziers. Now I'm bringing in a pedal as something to just as a guide. I'm not really going to try to build this exact pedal, but you can see that a pedal already has, certain kinds of shape. Now, what I do here a lot, I don't do this a lot, but I do it for demonstration purposes. I take the reference image and I take it into Photoshop and I convert it to edges in Photoshop so that people can kind of see the edges I'm trying to make. Okay, because I build basically by like drawing, and so I'm drawing the edges. And so this is where you can kind of see the edge structure. I'm going to try to go for something similar to this. Like I said, I'm not trying to make this specific pedal, just something similar to this. So when I look at the bike, it looks like a pedal. Okay, so what we're doing here is grabbing these edges. And then in Max, you have a divide function. Okay. And over on the left, you can go up and click divide on your striking menu, and it will divide it. Okay. Now, that's determined by the settings that's over here on the right on our panel. You'll see how that's set to 1. Okay, so whatever that's set at, that's what's happening when I use my right-clicking menu. Okay, so if I take that back out and I set it to 2, then it'll divide it into 2. Okay, so it defaults to 1, but it'll hold whatever the last setting is. So if I needed 5, then it'll put 5. Now, the funny thing to know here is it says divide by 5. It's actually putting 5 vertices in here, so it's actually dividing it into 6. So if you put 5, divide by 5, it gives you 6 parts, which is a little bit odd to me. But so what you're saying is we're putting in 5 vertices that'll give us 6 parts. Okay. All right. I just wanted to cover that because a lot of people don't know of that tool that you can use, but we're just going to divide it. We just need 1 so that we can pull it out. So it will be a little bit more triangular looking, kind of like this, our reference is here. Okay. So we'll go back to 1 and then we'll divide it. Okay. So then what we're going to do is come in and grab these vertices and we're going to scale it out. Now, a lot of people are not quite sure how to use these utilities up here. Okay. But you have a little utility. Can you see where it says view up there at the top? Right to the right of that is a little, 2 little boxes with green ticks on it. Now, if you click and hold down on that, okay, it'll do a fly out. Okay. And each one of these has different, usage. The top one means that everything will scale or rotate, whatever we're trying to do, on its own center. Okay. And that's what the default is. So I show people how to use this scale all the time, and then people can't get it to do anything. And that's because that's on the default. Okay. The bottom one is the world. Okay. So, and the world can be many different things. So wherever it says view, we click on world and we have that one set on the bottom, which is world, then that's going to be at the origin. So it'd be 0, 0, 0 where it's scaling from, which is not what we want, but I just want to go over this because a lot of people are kind of confused over these tools a little bit. And by the way, if I click pick, I can go and pick something like pick this original petal that was made. And now if I have it's set to use world and that's set to pick, then I can use that as the center of the scale. Okay, so we want the center one, which tells us to be able to scale out from the center point between whatever my selection is. That's the one we want. And then we're going to constrain our scale out and it'll give us something kind of like that. Okay, so we're going to pick the top ones and the bottom ones. And then what we're going to do is to come in here and chamfer those. So I'm clicking the chamfer button and then I'm going to put my mouse over the top of one of those vertices, click, hold down and drag. And I will chamfer that, which will give us, kind of a rounded edge to that. You'll see they're Beziers. This is what I was talking about. So we're going to convert those to corners again. And sometimes if I need it to be a little bit more round and I don't want to use as many subdivisions, I can chamfer those again. So I get more of a rounded edge. Now I'm not going to do that on this because I think these 2 will be enough of our cage to subdivide. Okay. And then I want to subdivide these with a different amount. So I'm selecting them separately, something about like that. Then when I'm going to take these over on the left, and you can see again, made these as Beziers. We have to make them corners again. Then I'm going to take these on the left and I'm going to scale those out a little bit wider so that they're a little bit wider than what it is on the outside of the petal, because I want to put that little shaft connector on it. And so I'm going to scale that out a little bit bigger. Now, the thing about building something in splines like this is all mathematically accurate. A lot of people will build this from a box, or if they're pretty good modelers, they really won't use a box. They'll use a plane. They'll go and start cutting a plane. And that's just takes forever to do it that way. You can do it that way, but it takes forever and it's not accurate because you're having to freeform cut things. Okay. So now we're going to go into the spline state, and there is a utility here called outline. And so if I click on it and push up on the mouse, then it'll go inside. If I pull down, it'll go outside. Okay. But you can run into a problem that those corner vertices can start collapsing over top of themselves. So you have to be careful about that. So what I'm going to do is to stop that, and I'm going to go in here, and there's a little center button over here you can click, and now they'll scale from their center, which will give you a little bit better control over this. And we want something kind of sort of like this. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is go up here and click the button cross section. Now cross section, you click on one to the other. It doesn't matter if you go inside out or outside in. And then it will automatically draw all the crossing lines in here, and to make everything so that we have quads. So when we convert this to polygons, we have a bunch of quads in here. Now, another thing is there's actually a cross-section modifier in here, which is the way we used to use these tools a long time ago. They didn't have a cross-section built into the spline, so you had to actually go up here and use a modifier to put on it to do the cross section. You don't have to do that anymore, but I just want to show it to you. So it's built into the spline itself now. Okay, but another thing I want to show you is sometimes, a spline has a direction. It's either clockwise or counterclockwise. Now, in our case, both of these are going the same direction, because one's a copy of the other, but sometimes you're drawing separate splines, and they may be going in different directions. So I'm going to reverse this one. There's a reverse button over here at the spline state, and I'm going to reverse this one backwards and show you what happens when we do a cross section and the splines are going different directions. So one of these is clockwise and the other one's counterclockwise. Ouch! We're going to get something like this. So if you're using the cross section, you get something weird like this, it's because one of your splines is going in the opposite direction. Okay, so let me undo this, and then I'm going to pick the outside one and reverse it. Doesn't matter if they're both going clockwise or counterclockwise. They just have to be going the correct direction, and it's lining their first vertex up. So if your vertices don't line up, you'll get some twisting on it too. Every piece of geometry that we ever make, whether it's from a spline or it's a three-dimensional piece of geometry, everything is numbered. All the vertices are numbered. Everything in the program, you can think of, the computer doesn't care about the polygons, it cares about the vertices. Okay, so it numbers all the vertices. Now you can go on to your controls, and you can slide down to selection, and there's a button that says show vertex numbers, and the numbers will come out. And that'll tell you, because what we have to do is make sure our splines are aligned. So 1 is going to 1, 2 is going to 2, 3 is going to 3, and so forth. So if the splines were reversed, one going one direction, one going the other, then your numbers wouldn't align correctly. And that's what it's doing. It's actually attaching 1 to 1, 2 to 2, 3 to 3, and so forth. Okay, so now there is a basic shape for our outside part of the shape. So now let's just go in here and go create line. Got my snaps on, and my snaps are set to vertices. Doesn't matter if I weld these or not. This is a kind of a thing that pops up all the time. I wish there was some way I could turn it off, but there isn't. And it doesn't matter if we weld these or not weld them. Doesn't make any difference. Okay, so we got to our little crossbar in there. So now I'm going to pick these two segments, and I'm going to do my divide again to put some points in the center of those. So I'm going to grab these vertices, and here we go again. These have all got to be corners. And then I'm going to kind of drag these over to the right. Be sure you have your snap turned off if you have a snap on. Okay, that's about right. Okay, I'm going to pick these two, and I'm going to divide again. Now you can manually go in and just input these vertices, but I know both of them are symmetrical if I'm dividing them this way. Okay, I'm going to go create line, and now I'm going to connect these and give us our little inside piece that's going through here, like so. Okay. And I'm going to select all these again and turn them into corners again. And there is our basic shape. Now, it's taken us a little ways to draw this because I'm sitting here doing it slow and explaining it. But I mean, this would have taken me 1 minute to do this. Okay. All right, I'm going to pick those edges and delete those out of theirs because I want that to be a hole left open. And like I said, I'm not trying to make it exactly like this other piece, but something like this piece. Okay, we're going to make a copy of this because I'm going to show you two different ways to convert this to polygons. Okay, so now it's still splines, but we're going to convert it to polygons. Just going to save this real quick. Okay, so now if I convert this to editable poly, you can see it's going to destroy my shape. A lot of times You can build splines this way if it's a simple shape and just convert it to editable poly, but this is a complex shape, so you can't really do it that way. Okay, so do one last time, turn all these into corners. And you can see, like I said again, you can't really do an editable poly. Okay, but there's two different ways I'm going to show you how to do this. Okay, so what we're going to do now is we're going to draw a plane, okay? Just a plain plane, okay? And what I mean by that is when you, by default, when you create a plane, it's got 4 subdivisions, and I don't want any of those subdivisions in here, so we want to zero this out. So if we right click on the little arrows, they will go zero out, meaning it goes to their lowest number, which in this case is 1. And so now I basically have, you know, one quad, which is 2 triangles. And now what I'm going to do is project the spline onto that surface. So I changed to compound objects. I have the plane picked, and then I click shape merge, shape being what Max refers to as spline as a shape. I click pick shape, and then I go over and I pick the spline. Okay, I'm going to move the plane over so you can see it, and it projected that spline down onto that surface. So now you'll see it's called a shape merge. So it's still in its interactive state of the splines being projected onto the surface. Now we have some settings over here called cookie cutter. So when I do cookie cutter, and then I can invert that, it's going to try to delete the parts that I want. But sometimes when you have a very complex shape, it doesn't work. Okay, so we're going to turn that back off. And then what we're going to do here is convert it to an editable poly, so it's no longer a shape merge. It's just a regular polygon now. Now you may get some little artifacts that pop up. That's just because the surface normals don't know exactly what to do. So don't worry about those. I could go in and fix it, but the thing about it is once I delete out the polygons I don't want, it'll probably fix itself anyway. So I go in here and I pick the polygons I don't want, the spaces and the piece around, and you'll see it fix itself. And now I've converted this into a polygon. Okay, so the spline projected onto the polygon and then convert it. Okay, now we're going to shift to vertex, and we're going to see an issue with this process. The issue is when it projects, it puts a lot of vertices that I don't really need. Now I have a special script that I'm running on my computer, and I'll put a link to where you can get this script that'll clean it. It gets rid of those spurious vertices, but I'll show you a manual way to do this that you don't have to have that script. That's a script I downloaded from scriptspot.com, and it'll clean, or it'll actually, what it does is selects any vertex that has 2 edges, because in a shape like this, all of the vertices I need are ones that have more than 2 edges to them, so it can easily select the ones I don't want, and then I can just hit remove. But I want to show you how to manually do this. There's a quick way to be able to get rid of all this stuff, even if you don't have the script. The problem with the script is it's version specific. So in other words, there used to be a script I used to use all the time on ScriptSpot called Vertex Cleaner. It was awesome, just a little script that would clean all this. But it stopped working in Max like 2015, 2016, something like that. So you can't use it anymore. But I did find a new one that has a ton of scripts on it, and I don't use all the scripts that are on it, but it does have a script on it that I use to clean it, and so that's what it has on there. But I'm going to show you how to manually do this. Okay, so first of all, I go and select border. So I select the outside borders. Once you have the border selected, I'm going to convert that selection to vertices. Okay, so I'm holding down the control key, and then I select the vertices, then it will select all of the vertices around the outside. Then I control I, invert that selection, then I'll give me all the vertices on the inside that I don't need, and then I'm doing backspace to remove those. That gets rid of all of the vertices along the inside. Ignore the little black spot up there. That's just because some normals are flipped. And when I finish with this process, it'll fix itself, so I don't have to worry about it. Okay, so I go back to border. Now I'm going to hold down the control key, and I'm going to pick edge, and that'll select all the edges around it. Control I will pick all of the interior edges. Okay, Now I'm going to convert that to vertices by holding down the control key and clicking on vertices. That's giving me all the vertices that I need to hold the shape. So I do control I, which will give me all the other vertices I don't need, and then backspace, and that'll get rid of those. And now I've cleaned this to only have the vertices there that hold the shape. Now that kind of sounds like a complicated process, but it's not. I mean, once you've done it a couple of times, it's pretty quick to do. Now, for the most part, I don't do it this way, but I wanted to show you this way because I like to show people several ways to do things so that you have understand several ways. So I'm going to go back through this again just really quick. So we select the border, then we convert that to a vertex selection. Then we invert the vertex selection because that's giving me the vertices on the outside and I want all the vertices on the inside. Okay, control I will give me all the vertices on the inside. Then backspace. That gets rid of all those floating vertices that were on the inside of the shape. So now I just need to clean the spurious vertex on the shape. And by the way, see if I put an edit normals on it, it'll fix that little black spot that's on it, but I know it's going to fix itself anyway, so I don't normally do that. That's not a pun. Well, I guess it was a pun. Okay, so back to border again. Now we want to clean the vertices that are on the outside. So then we switch to edges. Then we invert that selection to give me all the edges on the inside, which are the ones I need. These are all the edges I need, and I need all these vertices that are holding these edges. So I'm going to convert that to a vertex selection by holding the control key. Click vertices. There's all the vertices I need. Control I will invert that, and then backspace will delete those or remove those off of there. And now we've got a clean shape, and you'll see it fixed the little normal anomaly. Okay. Now I'm going to show you the way that I would actually do it. So we're going to go back to the same spline that we started with before, but instead of making a plane and projecting onto it, I'm going to add a modifier to this, and it's called surface. Okay, this is a modifier that turns splines that are in shape of a triangle or quads into a surface. Now, the reason it turned black is because when we're building from splines, the computer doesn't understand if we want it front or back. So there's a flip normals button on here, and I just click that on, and then it'll make the normals facing me. So now with just a modifier, I've converted this to polygons. Now, there's two things you have to pay attention to here. One is threshold, okay, because sometimes it has some weird settings in here, and you'll get something like this where it's welding everything or it's not welding enough. Your threshold should be 0.01, okay? Now, I've got max set up for decimal inches, and if you do 0.01, that's coincident vertices, so it's only welding the vertices that are sitting on top of each other, okay? So threshold of 0.01 decimals, that's 1/100th of a point, will weld those vertices. Okay, now by default, the steps are set at 5, and you'll see when I convert this to an edit poly, it subdivides it by 5 times, and that's because this utility wasn't really made to make polygons. It's something I invented for it to do. It was made to do make NURBS kind of surfaces, okay? So we're going to modify it. So you're down here at the bottom where it says steps 5, we always want it to be 0, which means it won't subdivide any at all. I don't want this to be subdivided. So your settings should always be 0.01 on your threshold, and then your steps should be 0, which means it's going to give me 1 polygon for each quad that I drew in here. So then I convert it to an editable poly, and there you go. That's a much faster and cleaner way than projecting it onto a plane. But like I said, I like to show people multiple ways that things can be done. So I'm drawing with splines, but I'm thinking of polygons when I'm drawing with the splines. And then I'm putting a surface modifier on it with a 0.01 threshold, 0 subdivisions, convert it to a poly, and now I have a surface. So now I need to make this 3DZ. That's a technical term, 3DZ. And what we're going to do is put a shell modifier on this, and then we're going to give it a thickness. And oops, I left the select edges button on, so normally it won't turn red like that. Okay, so then we give it a thickness for however thick we want it to be. In this case, I think I'm going to make it an inch thick. And now that's a quad cage that'll subdivide just fine. So we can put a subdivision. It doesn't matter if you put a mesh smooth or a turbo smooth or an open subdiv or use NURMs. Doesn't make any difference. And we got a pretzel. Okay, so we're going to want to go in here and define this surface a little bit tighter so it doesn't turn into a Gumby kind of ring. And I want to show you a couple of ways that this can be done. Okay, we're going to put an edit poly modifier on this. And then what we're going to want to do is chamfer all of the edges to put locking loops so when we subdivide it, it won't turn to mush. But this is a little bit of a process because we can't just double click all the rings and select them all. You have to go through here and it'll take you a little bit to select them. So I'll show you a simpler way to do this is under shell. Down here, you can click select edges and it's going to select all those edges. Then with that selected edges on, when you put your edit poly, it'll push them up through. It'll pass it up. Now, since I don't, let's dump that. Okay, so when we have it like this, then we put our edit poly, it'll pass that up. So when I go to polygon, it passes that up. Then if I hold down my control key and I click edges, then it will select all of the edges that the polygons are selected to. So all those are selected. Now it's got all the top ones and bottom ones, but it's got all the middle ones in there too, and I don't want those. So if I come to the front, holding down the Alt key and then drag across the middle, that'll deselect all those. So now all I have is the ones at the top and the bottom edges where I need locking loops picked. So now I want to put a chamfer in here to put locking loops on those edges. Now, when I use the chamfer button and turn it on with the chamfer settings, sometimes it'll explode it kind of like this. You need to zero the settings out to 0. And then I'm giving it a little bit of a bevel in there, but you're going to see a problem in here in that it's putting little triangles in the corners, which is going to subdivide oddly. You have two different ways. You have a quad chamfer, you have a standard chamfer, but both of those are going to give us weirdness if we do it this way. So we really don't, we want a chamfer, but we don't want to use the chamfer tool. What we're going to do is called a hard chamfer. A hard chamfer is actually using the extrude tool. So if I hit extrude and hit the settings, now these need to be zeroed out because a lot of times they'll be exploded too when you come in here. So we have to zero everything out. Okay, so if you get this weird thing like this, just zero everything. Then the bottom one needs to be slid up a little bit. And you'll see that's going to put locking loops around it. And it's not going to give us those little weird triangles in the corners. Now, we do have a little bit of weirdness that we have some triangles on the top, but those are easy to fix. But we don't have the triangles in the mesh. Now, if I go ahead and mesh smooth this, this will smooth out okay. I've got my mesh smooth set on an iteration of 3. Usually that's about what you need. And you can see that makes a pretty decent shape. Okay. We'll put just a standard shader on here, but we want to see some specular. So you want your specular about 50 or 60. Glossiness at 10 is okay. Then that'll allow us to see specular highlights on those filleted edges. And that looks pretty decent. Now we could make it a little bit tighter. I mean, if this is all you were doing and we're doing some kind of a, a look for like Pixar or Disney, then this is fine. And you could leave it that way, though it's not a perfect shape. So if you were wanting to take this into ZBrush to do some additional work on it, you'd want to make sure that your polys are constructed a little bit better. And here I've turned the isoline display off and you can see some of these polys are kind of making funky little polys. Now they're all quads. You can still take them into ZBrush or Mudbox and do some decimation to it, but you'd be better if to fix it a little bit. So what I'm going to do is come to the top, and I want to get rid of these little triangles that are in here. So I'm going to go to vertex, and then I'm going to do a target weld, and then I'm just going to weld these out. Now, the same thing, ignore the little weirdness that happens when you first do the welding. So I normally do my weld and go all the way around it and weld out all of these little triangles. Okay, so now I'm going to go to move, and then I'm going to select these vertices, and I'm going to slide them around. But I'm going to go in here and turn my geometry constraints on to face, so I know they're just sliding on the face, and I'm not pulling them off. And then I just move these around so that we got, looks like the loops are about the same thickness going all the way around. They don't have to be perfect. Okay, so now we've got quads going all the way around it, and we don't have those little funky triangles in there anymore. Okay, now that only did it on the top, so it didn't fix the bottom ones. But what I can do is come back and put a symmetry modifier on it, which will mirror the top to the bottom, so I don't have to go in and do the bottom too. Now, if I want to, I can grab those vertices and kind of scale these in a little bit. Oop, I need to turn off my constraints. Do that again so that I can get that a little bit more rounded shape like it's in my concept in there. Something about like that looks better. But you can see the bottom was not done correctly. So before I put the symmetry, I'm going over here to hierarchy and effect pivot only, center to the object, because when you put a symmetry, we need it right down the center. Okay. And so first center your pivot point, because that's where it's going to put it, and then put the symmetry on there, and you'll see it fix the bottom now, because if I have the symmetry on the Z-axis, it's copying the top and putting it on the bottom. Now I can turn my mesh smooth on, and now you'll see I have a more pleasing shape to my subdivision than I had before. Now I can adjust the symmetry. If I grab that mirror, I can adjust it, move it up and down if I want to make it thicker or thinner or whatever I want to do. But if you center the pivot point first, when you put your symmetry on, then it would be the exact same shape size that it was before. Okay, now I'm going to make a copy of this. So I'm just holding down the shift key and making a copy because I want to show you a different way to approach this. Like I said, I like to show people multiple ways to do it, because what might work best on one shape might be different on a different shape. So you should know different ways to do different solutions. So I'm going to dump everything off of this and take it back down to this edit poly again. And I'm going to approach making it having locking loops and dimensional a different way. So I'm going to select polygons, and then I'm going to do Control A, which picks all the polygons. Okay, so I'm going to go down to the section, Edit Polygons, and I'm going to do an inset. So I click on inset, then move my mouse over the object, click and hold down, and then drag, and it's going to create an inset all the way around. Now, I have to be careful not to inset it too far, because you can have vertices that trap over the top of themselves, where you can see this weirdness going on here. So we just want to inset it enough to get a nice loop around it. Okay. Now you can do it interactively, or you can actually go over here and click the settings, and you can do it by each individual polygon or as a group. Okay. So this is in each individual polygon, and there may be times we want to do something like this for some kind of an effect, but that's not really what we want for this. So I need to undo that and then make sure my inset is just them as a group. And then now I've got a little locking loop in there. Okay, so now what I can do is grab all the borders, hold down the shift key, and move down on my Z-axis just enough to put a locking loop along the edge, then holding the shift, drag it down again to give it thickness. Okay, when I add a symmetry to this, it's going to do a kind of a weird thing when I switch it to Z, which is going to disappear. Now, the reason it does that is because it was a flat plane. Therefore, it's putting a symmetry on a flat plane, and so everything's disappearing. Okay, it kind of flips people out when they first do this. But what you need to do is on your symmetry modifier, there's a little arrow, and you need to open the arrow up, and you pick mirror, and then grab your F-axis, your Z-axis, sorry, and pull it down until your shape comes back. So now this is giving me my locking loops on the top and my locking loops on the bottom. And to me, this is a more efficient way to do this. Plus, they're perfect all the way around, and I don't have those little funky corners that we had to get rid of. So to me, this is a little bit more efficient way to do it. But like I said, multiple ways to get to the same thing. So my edit poly in there, if I wanted to, I could rip that loop out. You'll see it when you use a symmetry. As soon as you put an edit poly and you go to edge, it'll automatically select the edge. And then I can do control backspace to get rid of that. Now, in my particular case, I want that edge around the outside, but I don't want it on the inside. So I'm going to double click on all these inside center edges, and I'm going to hold control backspace to get rid of those. But I want it on the outside because I'm going to go up here on the top and put the little connector on it. And so I'm going to want a center spot on that. So I leave it that way. So now we can put our mesh smooth on there. 3 iterations. Ooh, can you see those little funky things? That's because I made the cardinal sin that when I was ripping out those edges, I just did backspace and I didn't hold down the control key. So it left the vertices in there. So you have to always hold down the control key when you do the backspace, then it'll take out those vertices. And now you'll see I won't have those weird anomalies in there. Okay, so let's go over here and let's put this little connector on the back side of this. So I'm going to pick one of these edges and do a ring through there. And then I'm going to do a connect because I want this split right down the center. So I'll do a connect in there. Okay, I'm going to zoom into this area where I want to manipulate this. Now what I'm going to do is chamfer this. But you can see I can't let these cross those other vertices. So before I do that, I want to come and get these 2 center vertices that it's getting close to. And I'm going to scale those out a little bit so that it's a little bit further away. It gives me a little bit more room to make a bigger division in here. Okay, so I'm going to go and grab that center vertex. I'm going to do a chamfer. And it just can't clip those other vertices. Okay, and now I'm going to select that polygon. Then holding down the control key, I'm going to switch from polygon to edge to select those 4 edges around it. Once I have those edges selected, I want to connect those with a setting of 1, which is the default. Now I want to scale this up. So if I go to scale and I go to the scale settings, where it says offset world, the magic number is 142. That'll scale that out. Now you have to make sure you have your tool up at the top set to scale. A lot of times people have it to non-proportional scale. You want it set on scale. So now holding down the control key and now click polygon, then I can select that whole polygon and then I can hit delete and delete that polygon. Now you'll see that it's got some edges that need to be turned in there. I don't really have to worry about that because I'm going to connect some other edges, and as soon as I connect them, they'll fix this. So now I'm going to come in here and select this corner vertex and then this vertex over here, and I'm going to connect those, and I'm going to do that to each one of these corners. Then that'll fix those little anomalies, plus then everything will turn back into being quads. Now these are kind of some stretch quads. They're not perfect quads, but for what we're doing, they'll be okay. Okay, so now what we're going to do is come in here and grab border. Then holding down my shift key, I'm going to scale it in just a little bit to put us a locking loop in there. Okay, then I'm going to go to my move, holding down my shift key, and then move it forward a little bit, putting another locking loop in there. Then pulling it a second time for the distance I want the little connector shaft to come out. And then pull out again, making a little locking loop. And then I'm going to go to a scale and hold the shift key, do another locking loop. And then again, for the thickness I want it to be, then go back to my move, holding down the shift, move it in a little bit to put a locking loop in it. And then pull a second time to pull it way in. And then when my smooth, that'll be my little connector that's in there. Okay, so a nice little kind of pedal. Doesn't look just like the reference, but it's enough to give us a kind of a personality, whereas the original one that the person showed was very boxy, didn't have much personality, box modeled. So we're still keeping it, you know, stylized. So it's kind of soft, like you might see in in like a Pixar movie or Disney movie or something like that. But still, it has personality. I mean, what you're trying to do is to make sure it looks interesting, far more interesting than the box. Okay, but maybe we want to put that strap in there. So let's see about putting the strap in there. Now, one of the things we might think about is if we were going to take this into ZBrush or something, you can see how some of my quads are long and skinny and some are short, and really you would want them to be as close to cubes as possible. So I can go in here with the Swift loop and just real quickly put some cross sections in here to get them to be a little bit more cube instead of long, which would work better inside of ZBrush. So we'll just pop those in there real quick. Okay. Then that will make our subdivisions a little more uniform. And then let's put one along the top. I don't need one on the bottom, but I want one on the top. Okay. So then we're going to put the strap in by selecting these polygons and then extruding these up. Oops. That's the wrong way. Then you go across the other way. Oops, undo that. Then you go across this other way. Sorry. Okay, so yeah, grab these and then extrude those up. There we go. Okay, so we extrude those up a certain distance. Then what we want to do is to grab these inside edges of that extrusion, and we'll grab both sides at the same time, and then slide those down a little bit so that that's about a 45-degree angle. And then we're going to select these polygons and bridge across it. So we grab those polygons, these polygons, and bridge. And we got a funky twist going on here. And this happens sometimes. So what I'm going to do is remove. So I'm just going to backspace, get rid of these, is make them as holes. Okay. And then I'm going to grab the bottom edges, just the bottom edges. So I'm going to grab those bottom edges and then bridge that. And now I'll grab the other edges on each side and bridge it, and now it won't twist on me. Okay, there we go. Now when I subdivide that, then it's going to give me a little strap across there. Now the reality is I probably wouldn't normally build this as part of that. I would build it as a separate thing because the strap is actually a separate piece. The other thing is you might want to make it a little more crisp on the edges. So you could grab these edges here and chamfer these. Then you could have a little bit more control over how rounded it's going to be just by how tight you make that. So it's just according, exactly what you want that strap to look like. Personally, I thought the rounded one was a little bit better. I like that better. It's like a pliable strap, whereas the one on the original one that the person had built is more like this, I don't know, it's made out of aluminum. I'm going to put my foot in, it's going to cut my top of my foot. I want it to be a little more soft. Okay, so that's how I would build this. Now, it took us a long time to build this, but if I was doing it on my own, I would have been able to build this in about 5 minutes. So Spline is a much more ergonomic way to build things than taking a box and figuring out how could I possibly take a box and then make it not look like a box by cutting it and stuff. So anyway, I hate box modeling. I love spline modeling. All right. Hopefully that helped you. Thank you.